Welcome everyone to LEAFline. Glad you're joining us. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm Brian Ralston, Associate Pastor at Centenary Church. And across from me, physically distanced, is Ben Aquina, Modern Worship Director and all things tech guru around here. And really the man who does all the work with the podcast. So welcome in.
Shucks, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah.
We love it when listeners tell us that they're listening and give answers to questions that we ask and give us suggestions for what we can do differently. So if you have any of those things, please write to us at centenary1911@gmail.com.
Can I get an update?
So for our first update, as a reminder, the campus closure deadline, whatever, has been pushed back. So for our first update, there will be no on-campus meetings through at least June 15th. The date may have to be pushed back after that, but we can at least confirm that up to June 15th, we will not be able to open the campus, much to everybody's chagrin, dismay, and grief.
Our sources tell us the updates, new and improved news coming to you live. The campus continues to be closed up for now. Yeah, I know
that
it sounds
derailed really quickly.
I know this sounds like Groundhog's Day. We've said all this before. You've lived all this before, but this is still going on. And yes, we are still not able to reopen for worship services, but we're still working on it. And our 3 working groups are still working on ways to get this done when it becomes possible. So we're hoping mid-June, but we're not sure yet. So stay tuned. And meanwhile, we also have lots of content on the website. We Are Centenary is our home shout-outs from home deal. And a new one has been posted by our family life director, Susan Trudy. So check that out. We Are Centenary. And if you haven't done one yet, why not? Because we really need to hear from you. So
please.
I'm a criminal. I have not yet completed one, though my wife and I have really
The offer is still open to Brian and to
intentions.
anyone else. I will show up on your front lawn with a video camera and a mask.
And he's not to rob you, he's to help film.
I might even just do that, even if you don't invite me.
So, yes, indeed. So please, check out the ones that are there. They're really, really great. And you can do a simple one if you wish. You can do a crazy, dramatic, comedic one, whatever you wish. Just please send one in to centenary1911@gmail.com.
And I've got a news item that's actually new. Our first church Sunday morning live stream will happen on May 31st. And to talk about it in a not awkward way is Brian Ralston.
Yes, indeed. So it's going to be the morning of the 31st. We will have an opportunity for you to join in live with a very simple worship service from the sanctuary. Pastor Bob will be delivering a message. Ben will be doing some music, and we'll be having a prayer sharing. And so it's a great opportunity to join in live together, all as a church family. Look for details of that coming soon, and we're going to really see if everyone's interested in this, because we want to get it up and going as soon as we can, because we know even after church services resume on campus, there will be some who are unable to join us due to medical concerns or just being an abundance of caution. So we want to have a live stream option so that everyone can join in together during the same time. And if you're unable to make it on Sunday morning, it'll be recorded so you can watch it later as well. So stay tuned for more details on that soon.
When, where, why, how do you be? It's questions from the community.
We got a question from the community via email this week. I was so excited about it. Carrie Sampson, good friend of the podcast, wrote in, is there a difference between a Bible translation and a Bible version? Some use one term or the other, such as New International Version or New Living Translation. Professor Brian.
Yes, thank you to the Czarina of Trivia, Carrie Sampson, who's been getting the trivia questions pretty consistently correct. Yes, they are different terms, but they pretty much mean the same thing. The publishers use them synonymously, so translation and version often are just the same thing. I think part of it is people, for some reason, think translation is too scary of a word for folks, so version is somehow more approachable. At least that's my theory. I don't really have any evidence for that, but they are synonymous. They are swapped back and forth without any difference in meaning. So yeah, New International Version, New Living Translation, English Standard Version. So, and the ones that are my favorites don't even bother with either word, like the New American Standard Bible. They just don't bother with translation or version. But you can pretty much assume it's the same thing.
So it's just a question of some terms go out of vogue?
Yeah, it's very much just some terms come and go in usage, and I think that's a good example.
Recommendations, give it a try.
On to recommendations. So, Brian, what you reading? What you watching?
You know, I am still in my weird phase of reading books I've read before. That's kind of fun for me right now, and a number of them, I'm reading some bios and some interesting memoir-type books. So the two that have struck me recently, one is by a man named William McRaven. He was a military guy, retired. He's written a couple books. The simplest and best one for me was Make Your Bed. And it just talks about 6 simple choices you make every day that can transform your life. And it's a really good little book. It's very short, and it actually started as a commencement address he did at the University of Texas. And then he
Pastor Bob used a clip
book
from that one time on
Did he
Sunday
really?
morning. Yeah.
I missed that. I don't remember that at all.
You want to change the world? Start by making your bed.
Yeah, it's a good little book. He was a military guy. He's written a second book about his expanded memoir type book, which is really good as well. And then I have another one that I have read twice now, Jeannie Gaffigan, of all people. She is the wife and co-creator of a lot of different things with Jim Gaffigan. Yes, as Ben is trying to imitate Jim. Jim's written a couple books that are okay. They're fine. They're funny, but they're just kind of, they're fine.
He's really cynical.
But his wife wrote a book about her experience with a brain tumor, and I know it doesn't sound like it would be a book you want to read right now.
It sounds hilarious, Brian.
Yeah. When Life Gives You Pears is what it's called, about her pear-shaped brain tumor. And as weird as it sounds, the book is touching and funny and, yes, scary and sad at points, but it's a really good book. I enjoyed it twice now. And so, if you're interested in a little deeper read that will still make you laugh and occasionally shed a tear, it's a really good book. And it ends well. So, just not to give away the ending, but she's still with us in 2020, so it's okay. So not to give away the ending, but she makes it. So.
Okay. All right, I have been watching the Star Wars prequels.
Ugh.
My wife suggested it because with our son we had been playing through the Lego Star Wars video game, and she kind of thought, I don't think I've actually seen those movies in the last 10 years, the prequels, so we're giving them a try, and we're just having a lot of fun discussing where the movies went woefully wrong, and even just talking about some things that they did well and missed opportunities, because my wife and I are big dorks. We like doing that kind of thing. One of the other things that we've been watching together lately is a TV show called Stargate SG-1. If you have Amazon Prime, it is available on Prime Video, like 7 seasons of it, and then there's 3 or 4 seasons of the different spin-offs. It's really good, safe television. If you loved Star Trek The Next Generation, this show is not as good, but it's in the same vein of innocent fun and exploration, and just, it's a good thing if you're stuck in quarantine. And on to Give It a Try. This is where we don't just bring you up to speed on what we've been consuming as far as entertainment and literature goes, but where we actually suggest things that we feel comfortable saying, you know what, go for it. Brian, do you want to go first, or shall I?
I think you shall, Ben. Go for it.
I have mentioned the Rewatchables podcast on this podcast before. They recently did an episode on Back to the Future. I have not listened to it yet, but I'm very excited to. Rewatchables, a podcast that discusses in a very systematic, categorical way these movies that we've loved and rewatched and how they've aged well and aged poorly, and it's a really great podcast. I'm also going to recommend a movie Kristen and I rewatched lately called Joe versus the Volcano. A lot of people are not familiar with this movie. It is the first on-screen pairing of Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and they are brilliant in this movie. The movie is really, really funny. It's really, really absurd, and it is surprisingly thoughtful and just really, really well executed. There's a lot of symbolism. It's kind of a modern fairy tale. I adore this movie. This is a movie I'm going to watch every year, once a year for the rest of my life. And on to one other thing, based on something Brian said. Most of the time, you can't really recommend stand-up comedy. There's a lot of it that's pretty filthy. Jim Gaffigan's stand-up comedy is really, really safe and fun. I'd feel totally comfortable showing it to an 8-year-old kid. There's just a real kind of innocence, not just about the fact that he doesn't say cuss words in his stand-up comedy, but about the subjects. He will talk for 45 minutes straight about food. This is a guy, Kristen and I have watched his stand-up comedy, and we have to pause it because it's just painful. Lack of air. Can't stop laughing. Jim Gaffigan, he's great.
That's cool. Oh, my recommendation.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Oh, my turn. Okay. I was drifting. Sorry. Thinking about Hot Pockets. Exactly. I would, right now, I think for me, it's about podcasts, and I keep coming back to a podcast called Flourishing Church. and another one called Unseminary, and they're just interesting right now with what's going on in our church world right now, just the culture of this COVID and all sorts of stuff. So those have been really interesting. I'd recommend you check those out, and those are just found where podcasts are found. And then I've also, again, gotten into my history vein because there's a lot of really good podcasts about presidents, and so I've just dug into a podcast about obscure presidents and presidential trivia and fun stuff like that. So it's been a lot of fun lately, but those are what I would recommend right now is some podcasts.
The things you recommend about like presidential history and all that stuff, it's kind of liberating when you hit that point in adulthood where you just realize cool is out of reach for me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to enjoy myself.
Exactly.
And I feel like we've both hit that part.
I think I hit that at like 18. I didn't care anymore, and I was just who I was. And that's
I was
me,
a slave
so.
to fashion,
Of course
as it
you
says
are.
in that Phantom song.
As you still are, yes.
Okay, on to, we did recommendations. Trivia!
Trivia.
So last week our trivia question was this. Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, and Jimmy Page all spent time in the same band in the 1960s. What was that band, Brian?
That would be the Yardbirds.
That is correct, the Yardbirds. I expected to hear this correct answer from Jeff Jacobs. He did not write in, but we did get two correct answers. One from Carrie Sampson with the help of her good friend Wikipedia. One from Randall Robinson with the help of his good friend Google. At this point, we're just thrilled people are writing in. We're totally cool with you cheating on these things. We just want to hear from you because we miss people.
I'm glad you used those tools because otherwise I'd be a little worried if you knew that just off the top of your head. So.
Oh, you mean like I did?
Yeah, like Ben does.
Yeah.
So he's kind of a nerd and it's just scary sometimes. And this week's trivia question. There was a U.S. president who wanted to invite the U.S. population into the president's house, otherwise known as the White House, because he thought it should be the people's house. So he actually brought in a giant block of cheese and had it set up in the entryway, the opening rooms, whatever they're called, of the White House, and threw open the doors, and the public could come in and carve off a hunk of cheese. And it worked. Many people came in and carved off some cheese, but the problem was they also brought their whiskey and didn't behave themselves once they got a little intoxicated, and it became a giant problem because...
There's a question in here somewhere.
Yeah. See, history guy just got all nerded out there. But the question is, who was that American president?
Who was that American president? Write to us at the thing we told you about. Main topic.
Main topic.
This is kind of a convoluted way to get to our main topic, but I'm going to tell a personal story. And before I tell this personal story, we don't have a huge sense of direction with this conversation today. So I hope it makes some sort of sense. I think I should start that over.
Yeah,
On to our main topic, and our main topic today starts with a story. They'll figure out later it's got no sense of direction. So I was 16 years old, and at the age of 16, I was an avid fan of the Altoids tin of mints. I would keep them in my pocket every day when I walked around. I was Altoid guy. I loved offering them to friends. One day I was in a Christian bookstore. I was looking at some nice Christian music. I brought it up to the counter to purchase, and I saw that they had this kitschy little item on the counter called Testa mints. It was a little candy confection, and I remembered buying those things because, and I don't think I articulated it at the time, but I had this felt pressure. I sort of felt this internal sense of obligation that if I was a Christian buying mints, I should probably buy these mints that might open things up for a conversation with a non-believer. Maybe somebody will see me take them out of my pocket and say, hey, that's weird. What is a testament? And I could talk to them about the Jesus. But I definitely remember a very, very weird feeling. And it kind of brings us to this idea of we're going to be discussing in a very widgy way the topic of Christian marketing today.
So the idea is, yes, the felt pressure to consume. And it's definitely fueled by the Christian marketing machine over the last number of decades. But there is something in us that thinks because we're Christians, we should be buying, using, displaying some sort of item or merchandise or whatever it is, music in some cases, or even in Ben's case, testaments.
And the core of that comes from a good place.
Yeah.
Like, my money does not belong to me. Technically, it all belongs to God in the first place, and He definitely has sovereignty over where my money should go. But the Bible's pretty specific about about where that money actually is supposed to go, right?
And where that money's supposed to go. And I think it's also, we know we should share our faith. We know we want to help other people find what we have found in Jesus, but we're very intimidated by that and scared by that. So we think that these sort of middle ground things like testaments or Christian t-shirts or bumper stickers on our cars or whatever, we somehow think that will help evangelize folks or share the good news with folks, and it'll take some of the pressure off us. And it also makes us feel better somehow to use our money for such Christian, quote unquote, goods and services. So I experienced this in an interesting way in my church in Illinois. So when I was in seminary, I attended a large and growing mega church at the time, I guess you'd call it, and it was growing tremendously. They had remodeled their facility several times over. One of those remodels included setting up what was called at first a resource center, and it was kind of an expansion on the place where you went to get tapes of the sermons and that kind of thing. They built that into essentially a whole space that was like a bookstore, and it became known as the Resource Center at first. You could go and you could get all sorts of sermon materials and books that the pastor had recommended, and then it became some church-labeled, branded merchandise, coffee mugs, that sort of thing. That's what it started out, and it was only open when the church was open on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights, usually.
That sounds like a good core of an idea.
It was a great idea. And then people got thinking, and, things always need to expand in a certain way, so they started bringing in more merchandise and realizing they wanted to be open more hours. And so they started opening it like Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays.
Well, that sounds like a really difficult thing to get volunteers to staff this store all the time.
And that's what was interesting, was they hired staff to start working the store. They had to hire a manager to manage the inventory and manage the finances. They had to buy a lot more equipment, cash registers that were...
Well, that sounds expensive. How are you going to make that much money just selling sermon recordings and mugs from the church?
You're not. That's why it became a Christian bookstore, essentially, complete with a t-shirt section, music section, knick-knack section, art, all sorts of things. And I checked this with a friend of mine who remembered, yes, even a little convenience store type section, so you could get your bottles of water or juice on your way in or out of church, and your snacks and things like that. A little convenience store corner as well. So all of a sudden it became a business that was located in the church facility, and because they needed to make a certain level of income to support the business and all the costs that goes with that, they brought in a ton more merchandise, and all of a sudden it became an encouraged thing for the members of the church and the visitors of the church to purchase things to, quote unquote, support the bookstore. And that bothered me, and I remember thinking, why is this bothering me? Well, because there became this felt pressure to consume from that Christian bookstore, because somehow it was going to benefit the work of the Lord in that community. And I don't know. That just really bothered me.
I think that's very similar to what I felt when I was looking at that little package of mints on the counter. There was this assumption in my brain that if this little package of mints has a cross on it, then the money I'm spending there is not going to some cynical candy corporation. It's going to some organization that's going to use it to put Bibles in Malaysia.
Right. And we somehow want to... a lot of these things are kind of a neutral thing. I mean, a lot of consumer goods are just neutral. They're neither good nor evil, but somehow we want to put a good motive on them or an evil motive. The evil candy company was just out to make money and sell more candy to little innocent children.
Curse you, M&M Mars!
But that good Christian candy company that made the Testaments, they are somehow giving 30% of their profits to Bibles in Malaysia, and that's really something we want to support. So there's that felt pressure there that just comes about. When the reality is, I think if we understood to give our money first and foremost to God's direct work, and then consume however you feel led to consume based on your Holy Spirit-led prayer life and decisions with your spouse and family and other important people in your life. So don't necessarily just give in to the felt pressure. And also realize evangelism is not a bumper sticker on your car or the t-shirt you wear or the books you have on your end table. That's not necessarily going to bring people to Jesus. Maybe at some point in history it did, but not in my lifetime. And rarely does it even start conversations. And you have to be very intentional, even if you are able to get into conversations, to kind of take advantage of those opportunities. So yes, I think
it's kind of raising a flag for the people that already salute that flag. Like when you see a Christian bumper sticker, it usually has more of an effect on me than it will on the atheist in the car next to me.
Right. And I think we delude ourselves to think that somehow that atheist is going to see that bumper sticker and immediately want to know more. That's normally not what happens. You're flying the flag to your other teammates, and that's a good way to think about it, because that's showing your team spirit in a way. And I think there's a lot of that tribalism to it, that if I want to fit in with my teammates, then I'm going to wear the same things or read the same things or listen to the same things, and that's not really, I think that's natural and understandable, but it's not biblical in the sense of, I don't think Jesus necessarily would promote a whole line of t-shirts that would be with his image necessarily. I think his whole teaching is that love will be the mark of the new covenant and of his followers. They will know you are my followers by your love for one another, first and foremost, and your love for those around you in the world. That's what marks Christians, not your merchandise, not your bumper stickers. Yeah. Sorry, Ben, I cut you off.
No, it's cool. I think the core of that motivation comes from a good place.
Yes.
Like, when I'm standing at that counter, when believers, are standing at that bookstore in their church, there is this core idea in the middle of all that says, my money does not belong to me, so God has sovereignty over where I spend my money. That's good. The assumption that spending my money here automatically is the same thing as donating money to a church is really not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
As good as the motivations of people running that bookstore may even be, as good as the motivations of the people packaging the testaments might be, whatever money you are putting in that first has to go to feeding the machine that produces it.
Yeah. And I remember talking to my dad about this many years ago, because we would go to Christian concerts or Christian happenings, and he would always buy the merchandise of that artist or that person. And I remember one of them in particular, he didn't like the music, but he still bought at the time, cassettes. And he still bought several items of merchandise from that little table in the back and I asked him about it, and he said, well, this is part of how you support the Christian artist or the Christian person. And I said, is it the same as giving to the church? He said, oh, no. This is above and beyond that. So if you already have given to your church, you've already supported your missionaries and all the people that you want to support directly, you've given to the Lord at least your 10%, if not more. And you have some extra and you want to support a Christian artist, if you want to support a musician, if you want to support, fine.
So your dad was being very self-aware. He was consciously putting gas in their truck so that they can go to a concert in the next town and expand their influence and maybe,
And that's it's a more direct way to do it, obviously, because he had the opportunity to. It wasn't going through a corporation or a company or anything like that. It was literally buying merch from the person that was, in our town or whatever. So obviously you don't always have the opportunity to do that. But I think if somebody in your church is making Christian t-shirts and you want to support that as a side hustle for that family or whatever, great, go for it. But just be aware that that's not the same as giving to the Lord's work directly, as in your church, your, missions agency, that sort of thing. It's an extra gift. I think it's great to do that. Kathy and I have done that. We've supported several people through Patreon and different ways that we kind of believe in what they're doing. Similar to us supporting missionaries, that's kind of an extra thing that we've done, but that's our choice, above and beyond our normal giving, and we don't think of it in the same category as supporting the Lord's work.
And you know what? God might indeed have a plan for you buying that Christian t-shirt. I don't know, Brian and I have no interest in attacking people's motives or anything, and we don't want you to feel bashful if you've ever made a purchase for that reason. I think it's just really, really good to be aware of what your money is going into. And there's a really poignant example for me of this idea of felt pressure. I think it was the year 2004 The Passion of the Christ came out, Brian.
I believe so, but I'm not certain of that either.
A lot of us that are over the age of 30 remember that movie, and it was a really powerful and moving experience for some people. But I remember one thing that I felt really, really weird about, and that was when I started hearing about churches buying out entire showings of the movie. They would spend thousands of dollars to buy out an entire showing of The Passion of the Christ, and then they would announce it to their congregation and say, hey, you need to invite your friends because this movie's going to change their life. You need to invite their friends because this movie's going to change their life. And it made me really uncomfortable because I knew that those churches hadn't actually seen the movie. They hadn't had time to properly review the movie before they started promoting it in that way. And that was so strange to me because as powerful as the story of Christ is, it's also one of the easiest things in the world to mishandle. I thought the movie was really good. The movie had a profound effect on me at the time, but it was this thing of buying without looking under the hood. that made me really uncomfortable, that these churches felt this pressure to financially support this thing without any knowledge of whether it was actually true to Scripture or not. And the only thing we really knew about it at the time was that it was from the star of Lethal Weapon.
Right. It wasn't like it was made or produced by a church or by a gospel organization or anything like that. It was Mel Gibson. So that was an interesting experience in many ways, because the run-up to that was, a lot of felt pressure to somehow support this. And even with that, before people viewed it or reviewed it, it was something you did. If you were a good Christian at the time, you would take your friends to that, or you would. And again, I think it's sometimes that felt pressure because it's a substitute for evangelism. We don't want to talk about our faith. We don't want to share with our friend. But if I can take them to this movie, then I kind of get myself off the hook a little bit, and maybe it'll lead to a discussion afterwards, and that's possible, and that's great. But I think that we sometimes don't be as intentional about those opportunities as we need to be, and we somehow think this will be the magic bullet that will get them to Jesus, and I love them, and I'm supposed to share my faith with them because I love them and I love the Lord. But again, it's so often not a good idea.
That's our discussion for today. We don't have some big grand conclusion for it, other than just buyer beware, I guess.
I have a grand conclusion, Ben.
Oh, good. I'm sorry, I spoke too soon.
Similar to the buyer beware. It's the be intentional about your choices, and don't give into that felt pressure. Don't give into that I should do this, or I should buy this, or support this.
Or even that shortcut mentality.
Yeah, and don't give into the shortcut mentality that this is somehow going to be a fast pass to sharing my faith with someone. This is the idea of being intentional about your choices and be praying about your choices. It's a very wise thing to do. Ask God's guidance, but just be intentional about where you want to spend your money, what you want to wear. And if you want to wear Christian t-shirts, great. If that helps you and encourages you, tremendous.
And if you see that item on the shelf, whatever it is, and you reflect on God's Scripture, and you pray about it for a moment, and you feel really convicted that you're supposed to buy it, cha-ching, go for it. Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly. It's just make sure you're doing things intentionally and not just because you feel the pressure from the team or the tribe that you're a part of to look like everyone else or do what everyone else is doing. Make sure it's intentional for you and that God is leading you to this. I think that's a good way to go about it. And then again, we're supposed to share our faith through our living examples, our words, and our actions, and love should be what distinguishes Christians and what is the mark of us in the world. Love for each other and love for everyone around us, respect for those we disagree with, and love for our neighbors. That's what should mark us, not necessarily tangible merchandise or other things. So focus on that.
What's that song lyric? They will know.
Oh, they will know we're Christians by our bumper stickers, by our books, by our t-shirts, and by our coffee mugs.
Yeah.
No.
And this is not Ben and Brian trying to exert control over your spending habits. You are fearfully and wonderfully made by a God that equipped you to go to Scripture, use your discernment, and make good decisions. And so we're just encouraging you to do that.
Yes.
One last word before we go.
So in closing reminders, we do want to let you know that there's a new video teaching available called WordWise. It is moi and Ben's gifted assistance. And what it is just an effort to give a 10 to 12 minute teaching on a Bible verse or several verses each time. And it's at least the first few are going to be something a familiar Bible passage that we may have lost the power because we're so familiar with it and so comfortable with it. And especially during this current situation, I found some of those verses to be pretty impactful in my life. So just going to teach through 2 or 3 verses a time. It's about 12 minutes long. So check it out. WordWise is up as of today.
Today being Wednesday, the 20th of May, when you hear this, it will be 2 days ago. And also 2 days ago from when you're hearing this, Brian posted a new blog called Walking When Wounded. I think that was the title of it. And as always, please send us things to centenary1911@gmail.com. That email address will be in the description below the video through which you are hearing this podcast. And we hope you write to us there, because we're lonely.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more developments at centenarychurch.net, and continue to check that out on a daily basis. Ben's making a real good effort to put stuff up almost every day or every day, so check that out, and new video blogs from Pastor Bob, and written things from moi, and other things. Why am I French all of a sudden?
I don't know. It's strange.
It's so weird. Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Goodbye.